Hello, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Today's episode is going to be on some of my go-to 223 308 loads. Got good feedback on the 9mm episode, so I figured this would be a good roll into the bio. If you want to skip it, skip around 3 minutes and 45 seconds from where it starts. First and foremost, I am a servant of God, a teacher, a preacher, a fisher of men. God is number one in my life, and everything that I do in this podcast is no different, and I don't apologize for that. A little bit about me in the background. I grew up, I guess what you would consider a heathen. Didn't grow up a Christian, but I grew up in the southeastern United States, what most would consider very poor. Hunting and fishing and shooting. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours in Iraq, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in law enforcement for several years in LAPD. I worked patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, where by God's grace, He got me through some nasty places in this world of war zones and some of the nastiest streets in the country. Not because I am better, because God chose to have mercy on me and had a purpose for me, and I'm thankful for that. After my time in law enforcement, I was a private contractor for federal government, for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify, doing private contracting work. I'm very much involved in guns and gunfighting. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I should say my primary MOS is in both branches of the military or infantry, as of one sort or another. Specialized infantry in the Marine Corps and an MOS that no longer exists. I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I won my first gold medal even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed by God with the talents He's given me to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. I've won most of my competitions in rifle and pistol, but I've also competed in archery and shotgun and even muzzleloader, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've competed in all that. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide. Like I said, I grew up hunting and fishing and shooting. I've done it to put meat on the table because I like to put food on the table with the talents God's given me. I don't apologize for that. I've done it as a professional hunter and guide. I've slain all manner of beast and guided for all manner of beast. Bear and wolf and elk and deer, mule deer, whitetail deer. I've slain ram and fallow deer and countless animals, and I don't apologize for that either. FBI certified, firearms instructor, NRA, and a bunch of other 3-letter government agency certifications. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. I've been blessed to be the commander of a tactical team, an SRT, special response team, in a large metropolitan area, where our primary job was to stop active shooters. But again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, called by God to share the good news, a teacher, a preacher, a fisher of men. With that, we will roll into the day's topic. So, let's start with the 223. And I think it'd be useful, especially for a lot of the shooters that are getting into the sport, to kind of understand the philosophy of use as I understand it behind the AR-15 and the adoption of the 223 and then later the 5.56. Why that's a thing, why we use it in the military, why it's so popular. As I understand it, when the Cold War was really at its height or in full swing, we thought we might face a communist country like Russia or China with a large amount of conscript troops, massive numbers of troops. A uniformed army, an army that had codes of conduct, maybe that had a different culture than ours, but understood the treating of casualties and taking of prisoners and things like that. And our thought behind that, going from the 308, was to be able to carry far more ammo, and not necessarily to kill quickly an enemy combatant, but to get them out of the fight, whether that was killing or wounding. Either one of those was thought to be desirable, and if you wound somebody, generally one or two people has to take care of that person. So, as good or better to wound them and get them out of the fight than to get an instant kill. That's not necessarily the goal. So to carry a large amount of ammo that was capable of wounding troops. If you look at the 223 on the civilian side, it was developed from the 222 Remington, and 222 Remington Magnum's a little bit more powerful, and the 223 was adopted as kind of an offshoot of that and fully adopted in the 5.56 millimeter, which has a little bit higher chamber pressures. We won't get into the nuances of the difference there. But you look at it on the civilian side, that's a varmint hunting round. That's a round for prairie dogs, rock chucks, and woodchucks, and coyotes. It's a good round for that. So understanding where it came from. Kind of the go-to round today that a lot of people think about is the M855. Now, as I understand it, and don't take this as fact until you double-check it and verify it, but it came out of NATO trials, and it wasn't even an American load, as I believe it was a Belgian load. And it has a steel/tungsten penetrator on top of a lead core and a copper jacket. It's designed for armor penetration and barrier penetration to be better than a standard load. I'm not saying not to have any of that ammo. I'm not saying that I didn't ever have a magazine of that from time to time for that reason, for stopping vehicles, for armor penetration, things like that. But it is not and would not be my number one go-to recommendation because of the fact that it has so many components in there. It has never been known for accuracy. People get so wrapped around the axle about their AR can shoot sub-MOA or whatever. But that ammo, in my experience, doesn't shoot and wasn't designed to shoot sub-MOA. Goal number one of shooting, look back at the Rifleman's Creed. Hit your target. It's the hits that count. I kind of like taking a step back to the M193. I like 55 grain ammo. That's my go-to. One, because it's generally the cheapest. Two, because it's generally more accurate than the 855. So it's more accurate, and the Americans designed that round. That was the initial round, at least the initial mass adoption round. There's probably some earlier development rounds, but designed to do pretty nasty wounding in flesh. And the 193, the 55 grain full metal jacket tends to do that, tends to do some nasty things. Since the 55 grain is generally just a lead bullet with a copper jacket, which we've been making for a long time, certainly over 100 years. We've got that down pretty well, and we can get pretty good accuracy with that, and we can make it at pretty low cost. I like it for that reason. I like to train with the ammo that I fight with, not necessarily exactly the same load, but same point of aim, point of impact. So I like that round for practicing, for doing things, for drills. And I like to match that for a hunting and defensive round with a 55 grain bullet that matches that same point of aim, point of impact in my rifle with my barrel length and twist rate and velocity and all that. And it may not be the same for you, so don't take if I give you an example. What's best for you? Let's say I practice with the 55 grain full metal jacket. One of my go-to loads when I was a police officer when I was doing more specialized assignments, federal task force, things like that, is the federal 55 grain true tactical rifle urban. It's proven very accurate out of my go-to AR. It's proven very good in hunting. Now I'm talking about hunting varmints and things like that, not deer. Although I'm sure it would do fine on deer if I had to use it. It wouldn't be my go-to. I have purpose-built deer rifles that are far better for that than that round. So that's why my go-tos are the 55 grain. I can afford to practice with them and shoot them. The 77 grains are great, and if I have some government agency buying me the 77 grain ammo, fantastic. But I'm not going to train with that stuff. That stuff's expensive. That Black Hills 77 grain is not cheap. I'm not going to go and probably run 1,000 rounds in a training course with that ammo. So what am I doing? I'm going to go buy a bunch of the 55 grain stuff and then load up my mags with 77 grain stuff that's going to shoot probably not even close to the same point of aim, point of impact. I'd rather have a 55 grain bullet that hits where I'm aiming than some super high ballistic coefficient 77 grain round that I don't train with. And what am I going to do every time I take my rifle out and train? I'm going to switch my zero and adjust my scope and do all that stuff and get all my different dope cards for all my different distances. If you're really, truly into shooting and gunfighting, you know what a kind of a steep barrier that would be, and why would you do that? Like I said, nothing against the 77 grain ammo. That stuff is great, but are you really training with it, or are you affording to go out and shoot it a lot? So, all that being said, I guess to reiterate, my go-to loads for the 223 are the generally Federal, because I like Federal. They have soft primers. They tend to be very accurate. The Federal/American Eagle, which is made by Federal, 55 grain 223 ammo. And then my go-to for defensive use has been for a long time the 55 grain true TRU Tactical Rifle Urban by Federal. Another honorable mention that I have used in the past is the 55 grain spear ammo. Notice I like the soft point or hollow point ammo if I'm using it for defense. The military uses full metal jacket ammo for a reason, because of the Hague Convention of 1899 and things like that. But that doesn't apply to me. I'm going to use the best tool for the job. You know what? If I'd like to train with the 55 grain full metal jackets, and I know they would do okay in a defensive scenario, but why not use something better? I'm willing to spend $1 a round to defend my life with, and you should be too. My life and your life and anybody's life I want to defend is worth $1 a round. And like I said, test it in your rifle, make sure they shoot in the same place. But for me, in my experience of, the 55 grain American Eagles and the 55 grain Federal Trues, they shoot pretty dead on. And like I said, test that for you. If you want to buy a bunch of the green tip, what people generally refer to as a green tip, the M855, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for doing that. I'm saying know what you're getting and why you're shooting it. Don't think that what's best for the military is what's best for you. Obviously, I ran that stuff when I was in Iraq, but that's what we were issued, and we had to use it. And it's made for a specific purpose, mainly barrier penetration. And is that the most important thing to you, or do you want something that's good in stopping a living thing? One of my go-to loads as of recently, because especially when ammo was hard to get, I bought a bunch of the 55 grain Hornady hollow point match ammo. You can look that up, the Hornady 55 grain hollow point match ammo. And it was a good price. I mean, the same price as other ammo. And I shot that into a living thing, and it did great ballistically. The amount of damage it did was impressive. I was just using it as my training ammo, but after seeing what it did and knowing it's a hollow point round, I felt pretty confident loading it up in my go-to mags, and it shot. My rifle sighted in for that ammo as well. So that's another good option for you. The 55 grain Federal, I believe it's Frontier 55 grain hollow point match ammo. Accurate, good, at least devastating on coyote. ammo. So if you're looking for a different option, I know that ammo is not the easiest to get right now. Still, it's getting much better, thankfully, but still not back to where it was, either in price or in availability. So that one deserves an honorable mention. Talking about hand loading. Hand loading the 223, I have a few loads to mention. Now, my go-to powder, I'm not going to give you any specific load data in this. My go-to powder is Varmint. I like Varmint for both the calibers I'm going to talk about today. Varmint is kind of my go-to. One of my go-to favorite bullets, and this is a specific purpose bullet. I'm not recommending this for defense, for deer hunting. That would be kind of ridiculous. One of my go-to rounds for varmint hunting, for prairie dogs and things like that, is the 36 grain varmint grenade. You can if you want to do this. I've never shot the factory-loaded ammo, but I know they did, and they probably still do make factory-loaded ammo for the 36 grain varmint grenade. But if you want to put a hurt on some smaller creatures, if you're out to eradicate a pest animal for a rancher or something like that, which I used to do, the 36 grain varmint grenades, I don't even know how to describe it. I would say look up a video of what those things do, but they just annihilate. I don't know any other way to put it. Small varmints. So the 36 grain varmint grenades are awesome rounds. As I understand it, they kind of have like a frangible lead copper powder or some kind of metallic powder inside a thin copper jacket. My experience, very, very good round. So if you're looking for that purpose, then maybe consider that. And I have gone hunting with people that deer hunt, and their go-to, and I saw that it worked, is the 55 grain solid copper, and I believe that's the Barnes, and I don't know if the XT, TX, whatever. They make a couple of different versions for it, but if I was going to hunt with a 223, one of my go-tos would probably be a solid copper round. I'm not saying solid copper is the only way to go to hunt deer with a 223, but I would put it high on your list to consider solid copper for that reason. Okay, with that, let's roll into the 308. 308 is kind of my go-to round. If you've listened before, you know that my kind of go-to rifle, if I had to pick one, is my Scar 17. Love that rifle. But I also have a very nice Kimber Hunter in 308, purpose-built hunting rifle. 308 is a great load. Don't think that because all these new rounds come out that 308 doesn't still get the job done and it's not still a great choice. If you listen to the Scout Rifle episode, we were just blessed to do with Steve Clifford, an expert on the Scout Rifle. You know that he's a big fan of it. Jeff Cooper obviously was a big fan of it. And I'm a big fan of the 308. It's good for a lot of things. It's a great round. So my go-to round for that, my kind of one do-it-all load for that is the 150 grain Federal Power Shot. In my experience, it's super accurate for a factory load. Super great, soft point, proven 150 grain soft point bullet. Nothing super fancy, just a good proven load that's very accurate. At least, like I said, your guns may vary, but for me, they are a very accurate load. And the thing is, they don't cost much more than FMJ ammo. Like good, factory new FMJ ammo. And they're great ballistically and they're very accurate. You can afford to shoot them if you're going to shoot 308. I mean, it's not a super expensive load. They're a great hunting load. They're a great tactical load. That's what I kept my Scar loaded for when I was commander of a tactical team. Is it like a go-to load? They're fantastic. And like I said, they're not expensive. So I really don't. I have tried other loads. There are other loads that are good, but I would really recommend if you're looking for a good 308 load, starting there. And unless you have a good reason to move away from it, finish there. It's a great, the 150 grain Federal Power Shot. Fantastic, fantastic load. The Hornady custom stuff is also very accurate in my experience. Very good if you're looking for something else or can't find that load. Very good. But again, that 150 grain Federal Power Shock, just a fantastic load. Now, if we're talking about hand loading, I really like the Barnes Solid Copper 130 grain. If you hand load, you can get some really, really respectable velocities. I'm not going to give load data, like I said, out over the air, but again, I like Varmint powder. Those 130 grain Barnes Solid Coppers are fantastic rounds if you're going to load your own. And this is a more specialty built, but if you want the 308 to be kind of a heavy hitter, a heavyweight, high sectional density rounds for penetration, for doing a lot of damage, not great long range performance, but a good game anchoring round. Maybe you're hunting close in brush, or maybe you're hunting something a little bit bigger than a whitetail. I really like the Spear Hot Core 200 grain. They're a fantastic bullet. They're not super expensive, so I'd really recommend both of those loads if you're going to hand load. The 130 grain Solid Coppers by Barnes, or the 200 grain Hot Cores if you want a little bit of a heavy hitter loaded up in the 308. And again, my go-to powder for all those things are Varmint. It's a great powder. Again, these are my go-to loads for purposes that I do. In my experience, they're loads that I've stumbled upon, that I've used and stuck with. They're my go-to loads. I've tried many other loads. Hopefully the philosophies that I've laid out have made sense to you. You may choose something different. As long as you make a good, educated decision, I would say that's great. Again, like we talked about in the beginning, I come at this from real-world, first-hand experience. That doesn't mean that it will transfer directly over to you. You may have different things, different criteria. You may have experience that I don't have. You may have knowledge of something that I don't have. I have guys that work for me. It's not affiliated with a podcast, so I'm a general manager of a firearms and trainings company, and I have guys that work for me that point stuff out to me all the time that I didn't even know existed. That stuff may be great. You may know a load that I don't even know about that may be great. Again, don't take this as this is what you have to use or what you should use. Just sharing with you, tribe, experiences to hopefully make you a better gunfighter, or at least make you strive to be a better gunfighter. I guess a few updates for the tribe. Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy update. If you've been listening, you know that this year I've been blessed with a Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy. He is just under or just over 5 months old. He is, last time we weighed him, which was a week ago, around 70 pounds. Judging from his enormous paws, he still has quite a bit of growing to do. His training is coming along great. I can easily say that I've been blessed with the best dog that I've ever had, and I've run quite a few dogs. My wonderful wife, who had never had a dog before, is not a dog person, has taken to it quite well. She is very much happy and very much loves our Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy, Alexander Hamilton. Another update, if you don't know already, recently added merchandise to the podcasting. So if you want to just, fly the banner of being part of the tribe, if you know about this podcast, you probably know about the Alpha Male podcast. We have Alpha Male metal coffee cups that say Alpha Male podcast, which is pretty cool. Also designed a shooting shirt, just a long sleeve shirt. If you've ever been out at the range a long day, you know that long sleeve shirts are nice for wind, for the sun beating down on you so you don't get sunburned, for stopping those little pieces of shrapnel that fly back from the target sometimes. They stick into the shirt and not your skin, which is nice. But a nice long sleeve shirt. We have those. The Bible verse on there that says, He who has no sword, let him sell his cloak and buy one. Quote from Jesus, Gospel of Luke. Anybody pretty cool and a new thing if you want to support that way. If you don't worry about it. You can always like, subscribe, and leave a review of the podcast for free. If you want to support directly, you can go to goodshepherdtraining.com and go to the Patreon link there. And even if you don't want to be a patron, you can go to goodshepherdtraining.com and check out some pictures of things we talk about on these podcasts. And you can see the merchandise on there too. So I guess your one-stop shop for all that is goodshepherdtraining.com. A sincere thank you to all the patrons that support the podcast. For the first year ever, instead of this podcast costing money, we actually had a surplus this year. For years, I just did it at my own expense. This year, by the support of patrons, we had money left over. I used that amount that was left over to buy a new iPhone because I had an iPhone 6S and it was getting so old that it wouldn't take updates. And I was constantly not being able to download stuff because the storage was full. And I do quite a bit of this business on my phone. And it was nice to have some left over at the end of the year to use that money to get a new phone. It's not new, it's new to me. I bought it on eBay, but an iPhone 10, which is quite a bit newer than an iPhone 6. And a Magpul case. So, just a sincere thank you to everybody that's helped support the podcast. I am humbled that anybody listens and that anybody wants to support this podcast. Thank you so much. As a thank you for listening to the end of the podcast, throw out a tactical tip. Little thank you for staying tuned. If you are getting into or have been into the world of carrying a firearm, whether it's for whatever reason, but generally for concealed carry for that world, you know how important a belt is. A lot of people get wrapped around the axle about guns, and then a little bit about holsters, and then belts are kind of an afterthought. But in my experience, a good belt is a huge difference on how comfortable it is to carry, how reliable it is to carry a handgun, how stable it is, how stable the holster works. Not a cheap Walmart belt or a belt that comes with pants that's not designed to be sturdy, like a good, sturdy, reinforced belt. There are a lot of good ones. But I'm going to give you a tip on one that's not a lot of money that's a good belt, one that I've had and used off and on for years. I just talked with my boss about it because I noticed he had the same belt, and he said he's had his for years. Both of us carry routinely full-size guns on our hip. And this belt is not super expensive. It is the 511 double-duty TDU belt. And 511 has it on their website for $25. You can probably find it cheaper than that. But the 511, double-duty. It's a like a double-thick nice web belt. If you know what like the military, the Army and Marine Corps belts are, it's like that, but way, way beefier, way more reinforced. Comes in a couple of different colors, but it's not so tactical crazy that would raise eyebrows, especially if you got it in black. It just would look like a black belt, which a lot of people wear. One of the cool things about it is that, at least the ones that I have, they're two colors. So they're like black on one side and tan on the other, or black on one side and green on the other. So you always have that more discreet black option. And you can also have like a brown option if you're going hiking or want to blend in more with the environment. And again, they're a good, thick, sturdy belt. And they don't cost a lot of money. And I'm wearing one right now. And like I said, I've had it for years. I have two of them, I think. I might turn one into a dog collar. But anyway, just a fantastic option. But whether you get that belt or not, just the importance of a good belt. Don't spend, all the thought and research on the gun and the holster and the ammo and just get the belt as an afterthought. The belt is important. It's kind of the foundation of the carrying of your gun. It's the thing that your holster is mounted onto and the thing that your gun via your holster is attached to. So it's important, so don't overlook it. It doesn't have to be that belt. I have a few different belts. I wouldn't use it as like a war belt or like a battle belt. I might want something a little bit thicker for that. In fact, I use something a little bit thicker for that. But for just a go-to wearing belt with a gun for every day, it's a great belt. With that Men, I want to say thanks for listening and have a blessed day.